Hey, Margie here. Your vision is so important for many things, and one of those is preventing falls. And there are issues with your vision that can really be problematic. And we're going to talk about those today and what can be done. And I'm excited about our special guest, Claudia Muehlenweg. And Claudia is the founder of Holistic Vision LLC and the creator of the Naturally Clear Vision Method. She always hated her glasses and has made it her mission to help others see clearly naturally, just like she has done. Claudia is a sought after international speaker and workshop leader. She focuses on finding the root cause of her clients' blurry vision instead of using symptomatic treatments. And she has just done so much with my community, and people have benefited greatly. And today I'm excited because I feel that fall prevention is critical. And it's just very sad if your eyesight is something that's, one of the factors, and there are things that can be done and you didn't know about it. So Claudia is going to really fill us in today on what we can do, some tests we can do just to make sure that our peripheral vision, our depth perception is in good shape so that we don't fall unnecessarily. So lots of great information. Stay tuned. Welcome, Claudia. This is so exciting. I'm so happy to have you back. You've changed so many lives in my community. That's why I wanted to have you back, because we talked about, things you could do for your vision the first time, but there's so much more in terms of fall prevention that I really want to delve into because this is really, really important. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me back, Margie. I love being on your podcast and I love your people and supporting them and educating them about all these important topics.
I have to be honest with you. When we met, I had you on the podcast not that long after we met. So I knew it taught me a few things, and it was all great. And so then I started implementing just a few, you're on the podcast, you gave a few tips, but I have to say, because that was a while ago, the three things you told me to do, always had problems with night vision. And, just not night vision, but just the lights were bothering me. And then you said, the sun's really important. And for people who wear sunglasses all the time, they're not used to the sun and it could bother them at night. Bingo, that was me. And so after that, I started weaning myself off the sunglasses. I'd ride my bike without the sunglasses, and guess what happened? No more problems at night. So that was the first thing. The second thing was you taught cupping, how to cup our eyes if we're on the computer for a period of time so that you can, it helps with eye strain, and blinking. So I implemented all those and no more eye strain when I would be on the computer too long. So this stuff really works. Plus, people in my community have done your programs, and I mean, there's numerous people who have changed their prescription. Like, it's just unbelievable. 'Cause when you first came on, I'm thinking, this is really interesting, but does it really work? And
Right.
so now I really know, because numerous people have thanked me. I mean, they actually wrote thank you notes to me. Thank you so much for introducing me to Claudia. This has helped so much. Or they've said something like, as one of their wins, that their vision's so much better. So this was really great, so I'm just so happy. But why don't you tell us, I know you went in more detail, but just briefly, I think it's nice to know the backstory, how you got into this. So maybe just share, briefly, so for those who haven't heard you before, they have an understanding of why this matters so much to you.
Yeah, I got my first pair of glasses at age 3, and I had actually something that's interesting on our topic today because I had a squint. My right eye was turning in, and meaning that my eyes weren't working properly together, which does affect your depth perception. So I would always bump into things and be like kind of that clumsy kid and not very athletic. And then I got invited to play on the handball team. I think at age 12, they needed a girl handball player. And I literally asked everybody because I was the least good person to be on the handball team. But what that did, I couldn't wear my glasses. I was outside. I was running around, peripheral vision, catching and throwing, hand-eye coordination. And I wasn't able to wear my glasses because they were actual glass. And after doing that for 3 years, my eye doctor told me that I don't need glasses anymore. And that was huge awakening. I went from the four-eyed, girl that was teased and bullied and being the nerd to like suddenly boys telling me I was pretty, pretty eyes. And really my confidence grew. And so I was glasses free. I discovered this Bates method in my high school years because I noticed that my vision got worse during the high school years. I had to study indoors, stress. I wasn't a great student. And so I kind of did those practices and I was out of glasses basically ever since I was like 15. And then in my late 30s, in a difficult marriage, lots of stress again, my vision declined. I was back in glasses. And a few years into that, I had this epiphany where I noticed that every time I took my glasses off, my vision was worse than it was before put them on. And I realized I've done this before. And I dug out that book that I saved from all those years from the 70s, did the practices, and I instantly, and some of those things were like blinking, you talked about, like not sunglasses. Immediately I noticed a difference, but at that point I needed more help to really get out of glasses for good. And I ended up signing up with private sessions, and because I was in my early 40s at that point. But yeah, that's the quick story.
Yeah, it's just so interesting because it's, how wonderful. Our eyesight's so important. So before we get into how to prevent falls and different things, I think I'd like to talk about, you mentioned something about when you got stressed, your eyesight reduced. And you have seen a correlation between stress and eyesight. I mean, there's a correlation with stress and bone health. There's a correlation with really stress and all disease states. But can you really share what you've seen? Because I know that's part of your program, helping to reduce stress and teaching strategies. But what's been your experience with that piece of it?
So, you probably teach that to your audience too, but we have this nervous system states, autonomous nervous system states. And we all know fight or flight or the stress mode, the sympathetic side system. And if you end that is a great way. Stress is really important for us to survive. But if we end up in this chronic stress where we don't really need to be stressed, we're working on the computer and we hold our breath and we have a stiff neck and your pupils dilate when you are stressed, your peripheral vision shuts down, which is really important for fall prevention. But you get that kind of tunnel vision. And when you're in that constant stress, your body tenses up, your breathing goes all the way up to the upper body. You get that tight shoulders, stiff neck, tight jaw kind of syndrome. And that will affect your vision because our vision, like everything else, so our blood pressure, our blood sugar, all these things, our heart rate constantly changes. Our vision also changes. So I'm going to ask your viewers and listeners, have you ever noticed that when you are stressed, when you're really stressed, or maybe you had an accident or something, that your vision was a lot more blurry than when you were relaxed and feeling good and happy? And that is normal. That's just a normal nervous system response that everybody has. So even if you have 20/20 vision, like if you're in like I said, an accident or something like that really stresses you or panics you, you will not have 20/20 vision. It will be more likely like 20/60, 20/80. At that moment, your vision acuity will be massively impacted.
No, that's an interesting concept. I was just thinking. So if you having like a really stressed day and you have your eye exam, it could be different on one day versus the next day.
Exactly, exactly. That's why I tell people, you go to the eye doctor and first of all, the eye exam itself is stressful, right? Who finds this relaxing, right? And sitting in a dark room, it's like this test that you have to pass. And then you're like probably holding your breath, you're probably not blinking, you're staring at the letters and they get blurrier and blurrier. And then you come home with this prescription and you get your new glasses and you're like, holy moly, they feel like way too strong because you were probably caught at that worst moment. And like you said, if your vision is worse in the afternoon or being on the computer, maybe you looked at the near point all day, your muscles are kind of stuck in that near vision. You will be measured at something that's not at all accurate to your actual normal vision.
Wow. So just a tip for everybody before you get your eye test, take some deep breaths, get yourself really relaxed so that wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah, do the blinking, do the cupping. I call it palming also from the palm of the hands. Relax your eyes and I really like prepare yourself, breathe. Take your time when you're at the eye doctor because sometimes they might have a lot of patients and they want to rush you and they do this or this or this or that. And just say that I need more time, really, advocate for yourself because an eye exam is stressful even for me.
So interesting. All right, let's get to fall prevention because that's such a big problem. Anybody who has osteoporosis, it's the fractures that we're really afraid of. And one of the big problems is fall. So we do all sorts of things to improve our balance. And all these things are major and can make such a huge difference. But something that's equally as important is our vision because there are things that happen that can really throw us off balance and can significantly increase our fall risk. So Why don't you share what you've seen and what we can do? That would be so helpful.
Well, there's a whole host of things. So first of all, I want to talk about the difference between glasses and contacts. So when you wear contacts, you have a wider field. Glasses kind of give you the sensation of tunnel vision. And our eye anatomy, and really briefly about eye anatomy, we only have a very small point of perfect clarity. And that goes for everybody. That's how the design of our retina is. You might have heard of the macula. That's the center of the retina. That's where we have the best vision. And the further out you go to the peripheral, the less, it's hard to say, I wouldn't say blurry, but the less well you see things. In the outer periphery, you don't even see colors. You only see movement. That's kind of the dot system. So when we wear glasses, we have that fake idea that everything in the center of the glass is sharp, which is first of all not true because, I mean, everything that's behind the glass is sharp. It's still only the center of where your eyes are pointing that's sharp. But you kind of forget about the periphery. That's the edge of the glasses. And the peripheral vision is so important, like when it comes to bumping into things, when it comes to noticing there is something or there's an obstacle or, there's somebody moving a car or whatever in traffic, which is not so much false, but, the periphery is really important. So in that case, contacts are better, but they have other disadvantages that we can talk about. But the other thing I notice is that like when you don't have good depth perception, and that's something that, people don't think about. But we only have depth perception because we have two eyes working together, focusing on one object. That's how we have 3D vision. If you've ever covered one eye and then you try to just point your fingers together, right? Or pour water into a glass or something, you notice like, oh my God, this is really challenging. So, but what happens a lot of times is nowadays, what has become popular is monovision. And monovision means that one eye is corrected for far and one eye is corrected for near. And they do that with contacts or LASIK surgery or cataract, where you replace the lens of the eye. And the danger with this monovision is that now you're only really using one eye. So when you look far, let's say you use the right eye for far vision and the left eye for near vision. And what I've seen with those people is that their depth perception, because now the eyes are never really working together as a team, that depth perception goes way downhill. It doesn't mean it's not there, but it's really weak. And in that case, you might not see that the shadow on the ground is actually a step. It's, like it's those kind of things where it's easy to fall. So that's just a few examples of where I see that the risk is higher if you have that like kind of weak depth perception. And it doesn't mean that you only have vision in one eye. It's a lot of people as we get older, our depth perception tends to get weaker anyway. And if you wear the glasses or if you have that monovision correction, you're at an even higher risk.
Wow. So let's just talk about that. So people who are listening who have that, and you're saying it's quite common that they do that correction. People that have that, what's your recommendation then?
Well, first of all, my recommendation is if you have lens replacement surgery or LASIK, there's nothing you can do. If you haven't used contacts, you can ask your doctor to even it out and to actually get different lenses for near vision. Ideally, we want different glasses. Let's say glasses for a computer than distance. Like I'm really against progressive glasses. That's another reason I didn't mention. That's also a higher risk for falls. So let's backtrack a little bit before we get into what they can do. So progressive glasses, or they used to be bifocals or trifocals, they basically assume that let's backtrack one more time. Diopter is only corrected for one distance. So you probably know, let's say you're wearing reading glasses, that those reading glasses don't work when you look up for the distance. And if you're nearsighted, whatever you have for far away is not really what you need for reading. So progressives have this idea that that when you look straight, you have the diopters for far away. And when you look down, you have the diopters for reading. But now when you first get those, and everybody probably has that experience, if you have those glasses, you're like, oh, wow, my brain is like, I'm not liking this. And, because now you look down, but let's say you're going on a hike and let's say you're 5'8" or something, right? You're pretty tall. That's not, reading distance is 16 inches. Now you have this correction for 16 inches, but you're looking at your feet and it's way wrong. It's way too strong. And so that makes you dizzy, or you walk down a flight of stairs. And the risk of falls has been really high when people get progressive glasses. Eventually, the brain gets adjusted to that. The brain is a miracle. It gets used to that. But initially, you have a way higher risk of falls. The other thing I see is where people now have those progressive glasses, but they look at the computer and which is straight ahead, but it's not, it's kind of near, it's not very far. So they do this. So they tilt their head upwards, and that's kind of creating a lot of neck tension. That is not so much about falls, but it's kind of creating, you're basically adjusting your head to use the right strength in your glasses. And that creates all postural kind of problems. And is also related to the creation of astigmatism, which is related to posture. So I advise everybody get out of those progressive glasses. If you have a distance where you don't need correction, don't wear anything. That's the only disadvantage is contacts, because you're not usually like taking them in or out. But let's say you're working on the computer all day, get glasses if you need correction for the 2 feet distance. And if you then need something for driving, get a different pair for driving. It's so much better and so much more inexpensive than progressive glasses.
So interesting. I'm just, me being a physical therapist, I'm so into posture, and that position totally compresses the upper cervical spine where all the nerves to the eyes go. So they're in headaches. I mean, so that position is just so damaging in so many ways that you were showing what happens with the progressives. Wow, very interesting. Okay, so everybody listening, there's some steps there to do, because a lot of times people think, "Oh, yeah, it's just cheaper. I'll just have one pair. No big deal. I can use that for everything." And I've seen that. I don't personally wear glasses, but I've had my kids and I've seen people really, just have such issues initially when they get them that it's scary because, your vision, you need to see. But as you said, eventually you get used to it. But, certainly don't want to increase your risk of falls. It makes so much more sense that you can have a good posture. You don't have to worry what part of the glasses you're looking through with the activity that you're doing. So that makes so much sense. Okay, so let's continue what other things you see that, well, you want to talk more about the peripheral vision and what we can do, or do you want to continue on? Because that's a big thing. So people, you're saying when people are wearing glasses, they're missing their peripheral vision?
Yeah, they're basic, because again, glasses. So our natural vision, like when we both don't wear glasses, but if I look at your right eye, I see your right eye better than your left eye. And of course, I still see the whole background, and I see my other screen and my microphone, and I see, my room. But we don't see things as well in the periphery, right? When you look at your outer, like if you can even test this, ideally with somebody else, but have somebody, stand behind you and maybe even different Post-it stickers or colorful things, and look straight ahead and look at a focal point straight ahead and tell them, where do you see that? Like, good peripheral vision is about 180 degrees on the sides. And then we have on the top and the bottom, obviously. We don't have as good peripheral vision on the top because as humans, we usually don't have predators from the sky. So we have more peripheral vision toward the ground. Like when you just look straight ahead, you see more on the ground than you would see high up. But on the sides, we have about 180 degrees. Now, you don't see colors on the outer periphery. You only see movement. And depending on your vision and, what your current vision is, and also the colors, there's what's called a visual field. You can actually get that mapped as an eye doctor, especially if you have glaucoma, which is an eye disease that is an optic nerve disease or deterioration. You lose your peripheral vision, and they do these kind of visual field assessments where you look usually with machines. In the old days, it was done with like pencils and, colors. But you look at a focal point in the center, and then you tell somebody when you see from all the different, think of a circle around your central focus when you first notice that object. And so the visual field assessment is something that usually is not part of an eye exam. It's unless you have glaucoma. But for yourself, like your peripheral vision, you can stimulate that. There's several ways you can do it. First of all, when you're on the computer, make sure that your room is lit, that you're not sitting in a dark room with only the screen on. Make sure that, because if it's dark, then you have even more of a tunnel vision, drawing you into the computer. But you can have moving things. Maybe you have, I don't know, a fish tank, or maybe you have a cat tree or something, or you have a mobile or something on the sides where there is some movement. And this is not just for the computer, but especially for the computer, because we are so staring into the screen. So that's one thing you can do. You can also do different things that I teach in my programs where, as an example, for your listeners, you don't see that, but, you stick a Post-it sticker on your forehead. And like I have a pretty long Post-it sticker. So my skin is a little greasy, so it might not stick. I'm going to use a different one that has a little bit more of a masking tape on it. But basically, you block your central vision, and now you only have your peripheral vision. It's really easy to do. And you're like, okay, what do I notice in the periphery, right? And you can make this patch or this paper in the center wider or smaller. But just notice you kind of stimulate your peripheral vision. You can even toss like a little colorful ball back inside. But it's an easy way to open up your peripheral field by simply blocking the central vision. So that's something easy that everybody can do.
I have a
And just
couple questions about that.
yes,
So
yes.
are you saying as we age, or is there anything naturally that happens with our peripheral vision? Is if you don't use it, you lose it? I mean, what's
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily. I mean, if glaucoma is, and there's another disease that's more hereditary retinitis pigmentosa, which kind of robs you of your peripheral vision. Those are the two big eye diseases. And glaucoma is kind of considered more of an age-related disease that people get as they get older. Again, it affects your optic nerve, and a lot of times it's kind of correlated to high intraocular pressure. So there's too much pressure inside the eye. But there's also low pressure glaucoma, which we don't have to go too much into that. But the vision loss that you have with glaucoma, often you don't notice it because here's the thing, and I didn't even know that until a few years ago. Your brain fills in the information. So think of like somebody that has glaucoma, for instance. Let's say you're at a crosswalk, you're driving a car, you're at a crosswalk, and let's say there's a kid on the side of the crosswalk they want to cross, but you have peripheral vision loss on that side, let's say. It's not like this, it's black on the side. It's not like, oh, you're like, oh, as if you look through binoculars and it's all black on the side. No, your brain fills in. So that might just show an empty crosswalk because it just fills in what your central vision, like kind of like if you use Photoshop, something called content aware, it just fills in. Your brain fills it in with whatever things you see. So it's not that black tunnel. And that makes it really dangerous. And so with glaucoma, a lot of times people don't notice that the peripheral vision has been declining. There's also other like retinal detachment that can lead to these losses, but it's not something. If you're healthy, you eat a clean diet and all these things, and you follow Margie and her tips, it's not like you would automatically lose your peripheral vision. But there is a higher risk with these eye diseases as we get older.
and how common is that? How common is glaucoma?
So I actually don't have statistics off the top of my head. And I recently gave a talk and I don't remember, but I know, for instance, diabetes or diabetes related, which is diabetes is a huge risk factor for blindness. And glaucoma, especially if you have the acute glaucoma attack, you can actually become blind overnight. That I think the risk for cataracts with diabetes is 60% higher, and glaucoma, I don't want to make up something, but it's like 20 to 40%. I can't remember. So a lot of people might be in the pre-diabetic state and the doctor is like, oh, it's all okay, nothing to worry about. This is where managing your blood sugar is so important because it puts you at a higher risk for all these so-called age-related eye diseases.
So would it be worth people to just check that? So is there a test, or is that the test that is there a certain test? Or when you go
Yeah.
to the eye doctor, what's the best way so people know if they're at risk for
So,
yeah.
so usually the eye doctor, I mean, especially this is where I recommend going to an ophthalmologist versus an optometrist. But they can measure, it's a little, if you've ever done this, you're in this machine and it's feels like a little pressure on your eye. You look into this machine and that's how they measure your intraocular pressure. And what's really important, I had an eye doctor on my show not too long ago. It's really important that your doctor has this, like for instance, if you had LASIK or you have a really thin cornea, right? Your eye pressure might show as normal when it's really high. So think of a water hose that's kind of worn out. But if you have a really thick cornea, the pressure might show high when it's not really high because right? So think of your eye, the container, right, is important. But if your pressure is high, they will immediately know that you're at a high risk for glaucoma. The more dangerous one is the low pressure glaucoma, where the eye pressure looks normal, but you have glaucoma. And this is often also hereditary. So often if your family members have this, that's why the visual field assessment is super important, where that's like the best way to see. And low pressure glaucoma is more common in people that have low blood pressure. It's basically linked to not enough nourishment to the nerves, not enough lymph flow, not enough blood flow, all those kind of things put you at a higher risk for the low pressure glaucoma, which is harder to find because when they test the ocular pressure and it's normal, they would be like, everything is good, right? They don't do a visual field assessment on a regular eye exam.
So are there a lot of people who this is missed? And they don't really have symptoms. They can be going around with glaucoma and just not know.
Exactly. They don't know because again, the brain fills in this peripheral field. And so you're not like, that idea that when you have this simulation that you have that black tunnel with retinitis pigmentosa, I think it's more that field where you have that kind of like small hole that you're looking through, but with glaucoma, as far as I understand it. And I had somebody on my podcast talk about that who has that low pressure glaucoma. And she is a vision teacher now, and she has found out way too late because she didn't realize she had that problem.
So for everybody just listening who wants to prevent falls, if they're on a computer, I think the other thing is our vision, just like you're saying, is so narrow today. We can be on our phones, we can be on our computer, we can live a huge percentage of our life very narrow. So I assume that contributes as well to not even looking at the periphery like we used to.
Exactly. So this is where you definitely want to be aware on hikes or walks or when you're out or even driving, like really becoming aware of the peripheral vision. And there's something that a vision teacher called Jacob Lieberman, he talked about open focus. And I'm always a little careful teaching that because, as I said earlier, our best vision is in the center of the retina. So when we're shifting our attention, whatever we look at, we see best, right? Whatever, like again, if I look at your right, I see that better than your left. If I really want to see the flowers behind you, I shift my attention to the flowers behind you instead of, looking somewhere else. But with this open focus idea is more that think of the sharp focus in your center of your eyes as mental focus also. So and mentally focus on that sunflower behind you, right? The open focus is more like you still have your eyes pointing somewhere, wherever they're pointing, and you would still see that best, but you have more of a mental awareness of the space around you versus being like, I'm interested in that particular tree or I'm interested in that particular cloud. It doesn't mean that you defocus to the point where you're not paying attention, but you kind of mentally more like, oh, I'm in this beautiful forest, or you know what I mean? So that's a good way to improve your peripheral, is just being aware of that space. And also when you're walking, and let's say you're walking through a forest as an example, noticing when you're walking forward, how it feels like, seems like all the trees are moving backwards. So and this doesn't just apply to the forest. This applies to if you walk on a street and there's street signs or picket fences, there's this feeling of movement in the peripheral. You especially notice movement. So that's just a good way to practice it. I have a few more tricks I can show with your.
Yeah, please do. But what else comes to my mind, and I see this all the time, is that we're so distracted in our head and so many thoughts going around that we're not paying attention to anything. And so we're so much more likely to be at risk. So besides peripheral vision, we're not even paying attention to what's in the center. So I think what you said is so important. And it also, by doing that, you're going to be so much more mindful of all your surroundings, which I think, and I see this all the time, I just wasn't, I know my father-in-law had a very bad, when he was alive, a very bad fall because he was thinking of something else, totally not paying attention, missed the curb. And so, yeah, so that's so very, yeah. So share with us. We love tips. I mean, I improved so much from the tips on the first podcast. I couldn't get over it, actually. I still can't. Every time I think of you, whenever I'm driving at night, like, big deal. The lights don't bother me at all. Just from not being so dependent on those sunglasses and just getting, being out in the regular sunlight. It's really quite amazing.
I'm
Anyway, so
s-
yeah, so share with us some,
I'm so happy to hear that. I mean, I know you teach a lot of, movement and fall prevention. And so improving your balance is obviously super important. And our vestibular system in our ears and our eyes and our feet and our proprioception all kind of give us a sense of where we are in space. But your vision is kind of like, you're like the chicken and the egg, right? Where your mental attention is, right? So you want to look at the things that you're moving into, that you're not, if you're looking at your phone, you run into the lamppost. And even if you have good peripheral vision, because your whole mental focus is in a converged state. So when we are really quickly to explain that, convergence means that your eyes are moving in toward each other. So if you're reading, if you're at the computer, our eyes are kind of slightly turned in to focus on something up close, right? That makes sense. If you look at the horizon, your eyes are parallel to each other. It's like a divergence, right? And so the really relaxed state is the divergent state. And in the relaxed state, we also have peripheral vision. So the second we are more in a converged, focusing on one particular thing, especially up close, there is more of that sympathetic arousal in the nervous system. There is more that kind of focusing, and there is a natural decline in the peripheral awareness, which is fine when we are reading. I mean, you still want to have, again, the room lit. You still want to be aware of somebody. Like, you probably, if you ever worked in an office and somebody's on the computer and you stand next to them and they're like, you're kind of trying to move and they don't notice you. And then you tap them on the shoulder. They're like, oh my God, you startled me, So you don't want to have the peripheral vision so locked down, but there is a natural way. So when you're out and about, walking around, driving, you want that divergent, you want that kind of open field awareness versus that the kind of mental focus on something up close. And I learned in Andrew Huberman's podcast, which was interesting, that our natural attention span is about 3 minutes. And it's not because of our modern world. It was always that way. And when you think about prehistoric, how we lived in prehistoric times, like, let's say you were weaving a basket or something, or you were doing something else close up, you would naturally want to look up, and because again, that peripheral vision will be a little bit more reduced, and be like, is there like a tiger like attacking me, or is had my tribe left and I am left behind because I didn't pay, So I think it's human nature that we want to kind of look up and just kind of make sure that we are still safe. Nowadays, we usually don't have to worry about safety. But I don't I advise against this kind of hour-long focusing on this close-up, like really once in a while look up and, like, not just for your eyes, but like let your attention relax a little bit and then come back. And so that's really important, especially when you work on the computer, to really don't, like, open up your visual field a little bit, and let go and let the eyes relax into the distance also.
Yeah, and the phone. I mean, what could be worse than a little tiny phone and people spending hours on it? So I guess if you have a choice, go to the computer versus the phone, because the phone's the worst. It's just so small in terms of where you're focusing. Yeah, so that's so interesting and so important. So continue. What other things, what other things can the listeners do? I love a few things they can put into practice so
Right.
that they can reduce the falls. Or what do you see as, what other things do you see really put people at risk?
So first of all, what I showed you earlier was like putting a big post-it sticker or something on in your central vision, and just kind of playing around with that, like maybe walking around and really like realizing how important your peripheral vision is and how much you do notice in the peripheral vision. And because we have such an over straining focus on the central vision with, like you said, the phones, the computers, our peripheral vision nowadays is so shut down. So that's one way
So
you can
wait, a
do it.
question on that. In terms of doing that as an exercise, like how
Yes.
long, give us specifics. So you take that
So
piece of paper. Yeah.
yeah, I would, first of all, I mean, I've had people put that on and break into tears because it was so almost like everybody reacts differently. So I'm not a fan of like, do this for 5 minutes or 10
Mhm.
minutes, but put it on and maybe start with a narrower strip, maybe 2 inches wide or 3 inches, and just kind of, how does it feel? Maybe just look around and what do you notice? And then maybe walk around your house a little bit. And if you want, you can have a tennis ball or a soft, bright colored ball and throw that back and forth, or just kind of, just be curious about it. And maybe there's a point where you're like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, but then take it off and notice, do I feel like I'm noticing more around me now? Is there like a bigger widening? I've done this on hikes where we've done an hour-long hike, but we had a post-it that was open at the bottom. So, but it doesn't mean that I was looking at the ground the whole time, because the whole point is stimulating your peripheral vision. But you can put this, I mean, obviously you want to be safe. You don't want to be
Right.
hiking in rocky terrain and, like cliffs, but you can put this on like, do it for how long it feels okay. So because if you stress yourself, that doesn't help. Like, you want to just explore with this and maybe slowly get used to doing a little bit more. So I don't like to prescribe exact times, but just do this and see how it feels.
Yeah, that's
And
what I wanted to know, what your
yeah,
suggestion
yeah,
was. And obviously, right, no one's gonna put it on and walk and fall. You start without walking, right? So that you're nice and safe and just it's probably a good awareness thing because we probably have no idea how often we are looking in the periphery, that's
exactly. So,
yeah.
so that's something, I mean, I wouldn't do that on but try it out and see how it feels. And if you notice opening of the peripheral field or becoming more aware of that. That's a really simple thing you can do. It can also help you with throwing and catching, and can help you with that, trusting your peripheral vision more when you kind of, especially if you do play sports or you play any kind of tennis or any kind of ball sports, that's an additional benefit. Another thing that people can do, this is like one of the simplest things to even notice how your depth perception works, is to hold two index fingers in front of your nose. So one a little closer, one a little further away, and the exact distance does not matter. Obviously, the further away one, you can stretch out your arm to arm's length. That's the furthest away, but it really doesn't matter the exact distance. But you want to have two fingers in line with your nose. One is further away, one is closer to you. And then when you look at the closer finger, you should see one closer finger and you should see two fingers further away. There should be two of them, kind of almost like a gate. Like there's two behind you, and I'm looking at the one that's closer to me, right? The finger that's closer to me. And then you shift your attention to the finger that's further away, and you should see one of those and see it clearly. And then you should see two in the front. They will not be, the double fingers will not be clear because you're not focusing on them. So they will not be sharp, but you see two of them. And you can even tilt your head, like ear to shoulder, tilt your head sideways, and the double finger should be going up and down, like kind of like pistons, and only when your head is straight will the two fingers be lined up.
And
Did
so
you?
what I did see that. I saw the front and the back when I
Yeah.
looked, and I just saw the back. However, and then what would be the issue that people see if they have an issue with depth perception? What would
The
happen?
issue will be that they don't see two fingers. They only see one of each. So
Oh,
they only see one. That happened to my mom. And so in that case, it would be like, depending on which finger you look at and what eye is the one that's either not participating. So you can stimulate that eye. You can look with one eye, cover one eye. But of course, if you cover one eye, you would only see one finger each, obviously. You only have the doubling of the fingers if you have two functioning eyes. But what I see a lot with people with a monovision correction, they do that and they only see like whatever, even if the finger they don't look at, they only see one. And in that case, we would be looking at like which eye is participating, and we would stimulate that. And so that's a really simple way of noticing if you even have depth perception and yours is good. Or even if you do see two fingers, maybe one of them is really faint and one is like a lot stronger. So that shows that that eye is more compromised. Maybe the vision is a little less good, or so that's also interesting feedback. And you can do that with let's say you're in nature with a tree, or you can use a water bottle. You can have three objects. So you can have your two fingers, and then there could be a third object in the distance, like again, a post or a tree or anything really. And then you can play it with three objects. So, you know, basically you have 3 points that you jump back and forth, like near far jumps, I call them. And wherever you don't look, let's say I'm doing it with two fingers and I have a fence post there in the background. So when I look at the middle finger, I see two fence posts and I see two front fingers, right? The further finger I'm looking at, that I only see one. Now that I'm looking at the fence post in the distance, I see 4 fingers, right? I see 4. So basically that's a nice way to just kind of improve your depth perception. Again, if you only see one of each, that means that one eye is not participating.
and you said that's a risk factor for
Yeah,
fall.
because
That
then
will
you don't have
yeah.
depth perception, and then you might not know that that the shadow is a stair. It's not just a shadow on the ground in the sun, but it's actually a step. And then you think it's not a step; it's just a shadow, and then boom, you trip. Or the opposite, you think it's a step and it's only a shadow, and then you kind of trying to like walk down a step when it's really just a flat surface. So yes,
And then when you work with people with this, that gets better. You can
yes,
something you
yes.
can actually train to get better. Well, that's great.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
As long as as one eye, like if one eye is blind or has very, very little vision at that point, you can still get the most out of it. You can still improve, but there is obviously a limit of what, if you really only have one eye functioning, then your brain will get, here's what the brain does. You probably heard of the parallax effect. The parallax effect means that, so people that only have one eye or only have one eye really functioning, the brain gauges distances by the amount of movement. So if you're moving, anything that's close to you will be moving more. Or even if you're static and objects are moving, they will be moving more than things that are further away. So So your brain will adapt. Again, the brain is a miraculous instrument that we have. You learn how to pour a glass into water, even with one eye. You get better at these things, but you will never have perfect depth perception, and you will struggling to like really notice if a step is a step or if it's just a shadow. And one more thing I want to add to that. So I've had a colleague in my vision teacher training. She had called what's diplopia, which is pretty rare. It's double vision, because usually when the brain, when especially in childhood, that usually starts in childhood, when the brain doesn't fuse the images from the two eyes into one image, that's the point, that we don't see double images. Usually the brain is like, we don't like this double vision, because we don't know if you're reaching me your hand or your cup of coffee. I don't know which is the real cup of coffee, which is the fake one, so to speak. So then the brain usually shuts the feed off from one eye and they see like, okay, forget about this eye. That's usually then lazy eye or amblyopia, what people or kids get diagnosed with. Then the one eye gets really deteriorated and the brain just loses one eye. And this woman, and I didn't personally work with her, she was just a colleague. She, even in her 50s, she still had double vision, like her brain never. So for her, life was extremely stressful because she would see everything double all the time, even the things that she focused on. And my teacher in the teacher training worked with her to resolve that so that she had single vision. But usually the brain is like, this is no good. Let's just use one eye only.
Wow, we could talk forever. Is there any other things you want to share on this topic that people need to know? And
I think we covered a lot. I think we covered a
yeah,
wide range of things. I mean, there's obviously a lot more that you can do, but just that simple finger test, just so you can get a sense of, is there a spontaneous 3D vision? And you can also, magic eye books, you might have heard of those stereo books, or, those books where you have like, looks like all squiggly lines, and then you kind of defocus and you see these 3D images pop up. Or if you go to the movie theater and you go to one of those 3D movies and you don't see that 3D effect, then clearly you only have one eye working, for instance. So there's a lot of things you can do to notice. And the 3D movies are extreme. So in most cases, most people will see 3D that have two functioning eyes. But somebody who has actual no depth perception will not see it. A 3D movie will produce nothing for them.
wow. And you're saying that they can get this tested, not usually by the ophthalmologist. Is that correct?
Yeah, the ophthalmologist and, binocularity tests. And again, with the fingers, you can do an easy test. So there's something called the hot dog. I can show the hot dog is basically, instead of holding the fingers in line with your nose, you hold two fingers pretty close to each other, like in front of your eyes and parallel. You hold them parallel to the ground, right? Parallel to your eyes. And when you look in the distance, you should see a little floating sausage between your fingers. And if you touch your fingers, it should be like almost like sausage links. So there's like a third, so you're not looking at your fingers, you're looking beyond your fingers into the distance. Do you see that?
I'm not sure what I'm supposed to see. So I'm
So,
looking
so
in the
you have your
distance.
two fingers and you look in the distance, and then you should produce a third finger that's kind of floating between the fingers, but you have to hold your fingers and on eye level so that
Oh, okay.
yeah. So look at the distance, look beyond your fingers, and you should see a little floating sausage between the two fingers.
I don't know about that one. I do see
Ooh.
something. I do see something between them.
Maybe move your fingers a little bit farther away and closer together. So the farther you move them away, the smaller it will get. Eventually, when the fingers are too far away from each other, you don't see it. Um, so that, and then you can also cross your eyes. You can do the opposite, where you cross your eyes, kind of as if you're looking at your nose, and then you also see that sausage. So that's the hot dog.
Mm,
That one. So that's another way to test it. That's a little bit more advanced than the other one that we did with the two fingers in line with the nose. And so when you have perfect 3D vision, you will see that floating hot dog between your fingers. And if you don't, you will only see two fingers.
Okay, I'll have to check that out again. But, so a couple things. I know what I'm excited about is you're having a free 5-day. You want to tell everybody you've had these in the past and they're just so helpful. So for people who really want to improve their vision and see what this is all about, can you just
Yeah,
explain what you offer? Because this is really incredible.
this is one of my most popular trainings, and I do it only once a year. I've been asked so many times to do it more often. Maybe I will, but for now, so this will be happening starting February 27th, so March 3rd, and it's a 5-week, not 5-week, 5-day, 5-day. I call it See Better in Just 5 Days. and participants had gotten amazing results. And so you basically learn in 5 days the 5 key principles of good vision, which is light, rest, movement, the fusion, which is what we just did with those things where your eyes work together, and then also imagination. So we see in the brain, 90% of our vision is in the brain. And so really honing on your memory and imagination skills or visualization skills is really helping your actual eyesight. So that's a free 1 week long training. And it's really pre-recorded videos. They're all very short. And then every day I go live on Zoom. And when you register, you can join my Zoom coaching every day for 90 minutes. We go live on Zoom. And then I can answer all your questions and help you with, let's say you don't see the hot dog or something like that. You would get support on those calls.
Well, I better come. I'm not sure if I see this hot dog.
And you can win cool prizes. We have great sponsors, and so you can win prizes, and we really reward engagement. And the reason I'm doing this is because natural vision improvement is still such an underground, kind of unknown modality that I just tell people, see for yourself. Like, because they're like, does it work for me? I'm like, see for yourself. So participate, join this, and you will see that it works. So that's really, instead of me trying to convince you and tell you, just do it and you will see it works for everyone.
Claudia, I love that because, right, we don't want to convince anybody, but everybody wants their eyesight to be as good as it can possibly be, and it really enhances your life. No one wants to fall because your eyesight isn't where it should be, or your prescription isn't exactly right and giving you headaches. I mean, there's so many things that can happen. And so I think that's great that people can test it out, try it, and see if there's a difference. Check it out yourself. And I still can't get over how I improved from the few things that you taught me, but also how people in my community, it was one after another, like, oh yeah, I have different prescriptions now, or no, I barely wear my glasses now, or I just kept hearing this. And so it really, whatever you're doing, and I know it's all good, but it really is working. And as I said, when I first heard this, I'm thinking, really? Because I've had children who've worn glasses their whole life, and the prescription keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So to me, it was so counterintuitive that could actually get better and better and better. Like, is that really possible? But I've seen from numerous people that it absolutely is. So this is great that you're offering it. I'll have the link for anybody. And if for some reason you're listening to this podcast after this is done, Claudia has other programs that I'll make sure are in the show notes. So don't, if miss this and it's later on, there's always other things. It may not be this exact 5-day things, but there's always something that people can still work with you. And there's ways that you can, get involved. So
Absolutely. Yeah. I have a free guide that they can download, and I have a good Instagram where I teach, and I have YouTube. So I have lots of free offerings for sure.
well, is there any last minute thing before we end? Because this is just so important. I'm so glad you came back and we really expanded the topic to include the peripheral vision and things that could really affect falls. Because how sad that that's why somebody falls when they're doing all these amazing things and it could have been prevented.
I agree. I think I want everybody here listening to know that it's really in your control what your eyesight looks like moving forward. And I know we have genetics, and now we have age, but that doesn't mean that you're doomed to lose your vision. And it's really, can make daily choices. And that doesn't just include what I was teaching, but diet, movement, follow Margie's posture tips, follow her happiness tips. Your mindset is huge with vision. So you control what your vision looks like. And so don't blame your eye doctor. They're doing their best, that they do what they're trained in, but you can make positive changes for yourself.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure. I love being with you. And I just really appreciate sharing this with the community. And I'm excited about your upcoming 5-day challenge. And I can't wait to hear from all the listeners what happens. So you'll have to keep me informed if you go, what changes that you've made. So thank you. And again, that's what I like. I mean, literally, you taught me a few things on the podcast, and it made such a difference in my life. So I'm always so grateful to you. When I'm riding my bike without the sunglasses and at night, I'm like, this is just amazing. I can, no problem. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a really great pleasure. I love being on your podcast, and we have such a great energy together. So I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. I always love talking to Claudia, and I'm truly grateful to her for the improvement in my vision after following some of her tips. So I hope now you have some tools as well as some tests that you can do to check out your peripheral vision, your depth perception, because you would hate to fall because of one of these issues when it could have been preventable. I'm really excited about her 5-day class she's offering for free. So you can really test it out and see if you can improve your vision as well. All the links to everything she talked about be in the show notes. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.